Hello and welcome to Logan Sounds Off. Today I'm doing an interview with the one and only Phelim Drew. Hello, Phelim. How are you at the moment?
Hi, Logan. I'm very well, thanks. Yeah, I'm really good, thank you.
That's brilliant. So, for the first question, I just wanted to ask you, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Okay, well, I'm from Greystones in County Wicklow, and I grew up there, and I suppose I went to school. I went to secondary school in Greystones, so I made plenty of friends there. I started off going to school in Greystones. I went to St. Kevin's, which is a Christian Brothers school, and then between the jigs and the reels, I went to several different schools. I went down to a boarding school in Waterford, Ring College in Waterford, as a boarder for 2 years. I went to St. Gerard's in Bray for, I think it was fifth class, fourth class, fifth class, and then I went back there first year. I didn't settle there, and I wanted to go to school where in my hometown, and I knew a few people in Greystones, and they all went to St. David's, so I ended up going there my secondary schooling, and I really enjoyed it there. Um, and then when I was about 16, I joined a local sort of amateur, drama group. We had a little profit share company, which means that when we did performances, we used to share the money that came in. So I had a little bit of money from that every week, and I did a lot of work with them over a 2 year period. So I had tons of experience with them, which was great. And then when I left school, I went to the Gaiety School of Acting, which was in its first year as a full-time course. So I did a year there, and then I started acting. So I really feel like I started when I was 16, because whether you're being paid or not, as long as you're enjoying it and you're getting plenty of experience, it's all work. But it doesn't feel like work when you're enjoying it.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Phelim, and you're totally right. We actually talked in school about if you're going to work, make sure that you're happy doing it, not for the money.
Mm-hmm.
Um, So my first question is, a lot of people would think growing up that you would listen to a lot of trad music. Now, I read that your dad actually had a very eclectic record collection, which is very interesting with loads of different artists, including, yes, some trad. You did listen to a good bit of trad growing up, but that wasn't the only thing. Could you expand on that a bit?
Yes. Well, I suppose when he went to Spain first was when he really started to kind of started to play music. He learned some flamenco guitar, which is a kind of a Spanish folk, their style of traditional music in Spain, and he developed a style of playing from learning to play flamenco guitar. So he loved Spanish music. He had some friends who were from that world, people like Paco Pena, and he uh, he loved. I think his father, my grandfather, his name was Paddy. He was a carpenter, and he used to sing some blues songs around the house. And I think that was the music that was popular when he was growing up. And I think he passed on a love of that American blues music onto my father and his brothers. My dad loved American blues. He loved bluegrass, which of course is so closely related to Irish traditional music, um, and Scottish traditional music, of course. He loved all kinds of music. He loved musicians of all kinds, whether it was classical musicians or jazz musicians or traditional musicians. He was always very in awe of people who could play an instrument. and regardless of their background or what kind of genre they played.
That's amazing. And I can see then why your dad, Ronnie Drew, would be so successful in the Dubliners because he was so open to all different aspects of music. It makes a lot of sense. Thank you. And now, when you were 12, you started getting to a bit of a rock and roll, some rock and roll music like Chuck Berry and Little Richard, which is very interesting. And I wanted to ask, where did that come from? Was it from friends at school, or did your dad start to listen to a lot more rock?
Gosh, I don't know really. It's funny because I know that when other kids were listening to whatever was current in the charts, I just sort of I went down a kind of a rabbit hole with American rock and roll, and yeah, when I was growing up, we had Top of the Pops was the highlight of most kids' week, But when my dad was home, we weren't allowed to watch Top of the Pops because he didn't particularly like it, and he kind of had a bit of a monopoly on the TV. Of course, we only had one TV, like most people. But when he was around, we never really watched Top of the Pops. But I don't know. I just got into. I love the feel of rock and roll. There's something very, it's just it comes from a very raw place, and as we now know, an awful lot of the music that became popular in the late 50s and the mid to late 50s and in the 60s, which influenced the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, came from people like Chuck Berry and Little Richard, and then before them, people like Muddy Waters and Etta James and people like that. Who were in turn influenced by T-Bone Walker and who else? Yeah, BB King would be. I'd be a big fan of that kind of blues as well. That real sort of Chicago blues and yeah, Detroit kind of sound. Yeah, I love all that stuff, and you can go back as far as you want, and I'm always learning something new in that area.
That's really, really cool. And now, moving on, you mentioned that you're an actor, which is very interesting, actually. But you were saying that you graduated from the Gaiety School of Acting in 1988 when it just first started happening, the start of it all. And you were also saying about your drama club. So I wanted to ask, what inspired you to go into that drama club and to become an actor?
I suppose I was lucky because as a child, my parents, brought us to see a lot of shows. We would have gone to see Maureen Potter and the Gales of Laughter in the summer, and we would have seen her, in the wintertime when we went to the pantomime, and we saw Chris Curran and Cecil Sheridan and all these wonderful people who were friends of my father's, who came from a variety background, which was really popular in up until more recently, up until the 70s, I suppose, the 1970s, the 1980s. Years ago, there would have been quite a number of theatres in Dublin. There would have been, the Olympia would have been more of a variety theatre, and places like the Theatre Royal, which was knocked down like before I was born, I think even. But that was a 2,000 seater theatre, and these places were full and that's where people went for their entertainment, to see all these wonderful shows, and people came from all over the world, opera singers and great musicians, and played in the theatres in Dublin. So there was a great scene, and I suppose there was a great kind of cross pollination of artists. And my father would have, when he came back from Spain, he would sort of immersed himself in that world and got to know a lot of people. So I was very lucky that not only did I get to go and see a lot of these shows, but I got to meet the people afterwards, which is kind of important because you know you realize that these are people with with husbands, wives, with children at home who go to school, and that it's a profession. It's not some sort of unattainable goal. And I think it's difficult for some people who maybe don't have parents whose theatre, whose background is in the arts, because maybe they feel that it's something that's they'll never get involved in. Um, I remember going to see some theatre when I was around 11 or 12, and thinking that it was something that I would like to do, that I felt that I could do. And so when I joined Gladys, Gladys Sheehan, the wonderful Gladys Sheehan from Bray, she had a little theatre company in Greystones for adults. So when I joined that when I was 16, it was a great introduction, and I kind of joined it to see if it was something that I would like to do, and I just took to it like a duck to water. I really loved it.
That's brilliant. And then you debuted on My Left Foot in 1989, and it was not nominated for 5 Oscars, which is incredible.
Yeah.
What was that like?
Well, it was very exciting. I was very lucky to be involved. I'm kind of modest. I don't feel as if I had a huge contribution to make on that film. I just had a little job on it. I worked on it for about 6 weeks, and I was very grateful to Jim Sheridan and to Noel Pearson. But I got to play one of Christie's brothers, and I was on the set a lot, so I got to see how a movie is made, and that was great experience. And to observe people like brilliant people like Daniel Day-Lewis and Brenda Fricker and Ray McAnally, and then of course there was there was wonderful people in it like Mary Conmee, who was a great friend of my father's, and yeah, it was a great starting point to kind of in that world. And it was a wonderful experience. And then, of course, when the film did so well, it was great to be a part of that and enjoy the celebrations.
That's amazing. An amazing story, actually. I quite like the way you were saying that you were even though you were on the cast for 6 weeks, sorry, on the set, you got to meet a lot of the cast, and it must have been an amazing experience to see all these actors in their element and all the producers and everything at the time.
Yeah, it was. And I think what I was so taken with was that because it was set in the late 40s, the early 50s. It was just, the sets were fantastic, and the costumes. I think Joan Bergen did the costumes. Well, I know she did, and she did an amazing job. And I think Jim Sheridan at the time, I think it was his first feature film, and he very much gave the responsibility to everybody involved in the movie to do their best work, and from the sound department to the camera department to the lighting and the set design. Everybody just pulled together and did an amazing job. So it was a real ensemble effort, and it felt great to be a part of it.
That's really brilliant, actually, that you were able to describe that, because it's very hard to think about a film set in your head, because there's so many elements that people don't really know about. in making films. But now rolling back to the music, when did you yourself start performing as a musician?
I suppose I started when I was about 14. I started going to guitar lessons with a man called Pat Fagan in Bray. Pat lives in Tala now, and I've met him since. He's still teaching, and I suppose I started doing classical guitar lessons with Pat. I did that for a couple of years, and I always really enjoyed it. But I never really had. I always think with when it comes to musicians, it comes from a need to play. It's a bit like as an actor, you kind of feel the need to do it. It's not something that you kind of you wake up in the morning and sort of think, you know, oh, how will I motivate myself? You actually physically need to do it because it feeds you so much. It makes you feel so good. And I think with musicians, it's the same. And so it's not something that I really pursued hugely. When I left, around the time I was leaving school, when I was 18 or so, my friend Joe Morrison from Greystones and I started playing together a little bit in his garage. And Joe's a really talented musician. And another friend of mine, Paul Byrne, we kind of got together and we started playing together. And we had a bit of a joke band. We had a band called the Baskerville Sisters. And we got the name from there was my mother had a piano stool, which is in my house now. It's over by the piano there. And there was all this music in the piano stool. And there was sheet music for a song by the Beverly Sisters. And we were joking, kind of going, what happened to the Beverly Sisters? You know, so we were thinking that maybe they retired and their brothers took over the band. And but we just changed the name to the Baskerville Sisters. And because the sisters were better known, the boys went out with the band but still called themselves the Baskerville Sisters. And so we used to play all covers, rock and roll kind of covers, the Rolling Stones and the Trogs and all these kinds of things, songs that were relatively easy to play. And then we would always come on stage to some television theme tune or other. And we always had great fun with it. And that was, I think, part of its appeal for everybody locally, because if we were enjoying it, they enjoyed it. So, and that was good fun to be a part of, on and off for a good few years. But all during that period, I was working full time as an actor, so I didn't have the time to really commit to it. But we sort of did it as a sort of a hobby. In the last 10, 15 years, I've started to play more music and to just to kind of immerse myself in it a bit more. So that's really why I've started to play more music a bit more in the last number of years.
That's brilliant. And that's actually a very good story. I think you've remembered some really incredible details there. So now I have three quick fire questions.
Oh, no.
No, they're not too hard, don't worry.
My brain.
Your favorite venues to play at. Do you have any favorite venues where you like to play at?
I love the Gaiety Theatre. I think the Gaiety Theatre is a beautiful theatre to play. It's a lovely venue to watch a play in, and it's a beautiful space to play from the stage. It's really really well constructed, because if you're on the stage and you're playing to an audience, it doesn't feel like when the place is full, it's the atmosphere is electric. The place holds about 1,000 people, but when it's full, it doesn't feel like there's 1,000 people there, because you almost feel like you can reach from the stage and touch, the people who are out there. But it's really a beautiful space to play. But I think Vicar Street is a beautiful venue. I've never played it. I've been on the stage. I've been a guest as part of one or two events that have taken place there. So I've never spent a full night on Vicar Street, but I love to go and see bands there, and I think it's a really wonderful venue. Yeah.
That's brilliant. Next then, have you any music that you listen to at the moment that you'd like to highlight that you think is very good?
Yeah, let me think now. At the moment, I'm sort of listening to a podcast at the moment, which a friend of mine put me onto, and there's tons of music on that, and it's quite nostalgic. It's called. Let me see if I can remember it, because it's a big title. It's called Gilbert Gottfried's Amazing Colossal Podcast, and it's this comedian called Gilbert Gottfried and his partner, who's his friend, co-host on the show. I think his name is Frank Santo Padre is his name, and they interview lots of people from the world of movies and Broadway. They interview older actors and producers and writers, and it's just got all these wonderful stories from going back years, going back to Variety and vaudeville, the Variety and vaudeville days. So it's really entertaining. With regard to music, I suppose I'm always wondering, where I'm going to get my my influences from, but I'm not a huge fan of platforms like Spotify, but I do use Spotify because it opens me up to other music. So if I like a song and I put the song on, and then I go to the radio option for that song, it introduces me to music that I ordinarily or otherwise wouldn't hear. As regard to any particular artists, I'm a devil for just listening back to older music all the time. And like I said, I'm a sucker for blues music.
That's again perfect answer. So I'll actually look into a couple of those things. And then now my final question for you today, Phelim, is you've got a couple of gigs coming up. If people wanted to find you, could you tell them when and where you're going to be doing these different gigs?
Yeah, well, I'm playing with a friend of mine, Anto Drennan, next Thursday in the Stag's Head. We're starting off a little blues night there. Next Sunday, it's the 14th of September, downstairs in the Stag's Head. It's free in, and Anto's an amazing player. He's played with people like the Corrs and with Mike and the Mechanics, with his name escapes me now. Driving Home for Christmas. What's his name? But Anto's a great player, and I've toured a show about my dad called Remembering Ronnie, and Anto has played on that show with me, where we tell stories and play some songs from the Dubliners back catalogue, songs that my dad would have sung, but also songs like some blues songs that my dad would have liked, by Bessie Smith and Rory Gallagher.
Chris Rea, that's who.
Chris Rea, that's exactly the man.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. So yeah, myself and Anto have done quite a bit together at this stage. So I'm really excited about this. Hopefully we'll be playing there every Thursday. And then I'm playing out in Greystones in Dan's Bar on the 13th of October. And then hopefully in the new year, I'm going to take that show about my dad out again, and we'll take it on tour. So I'm looking forward to that.
You've got a lot coming up. Well, thank you, Phelim. So make sure to check out Phelim on everything. He's an amazing, amazing musician, and also a great actor as well. So if you haven't watched My Left Foot, obviously if you're a kid, you might not be able to watch it. But if you haven't watched My Left Foot, and if you are an adult, please go check it out. See if you can spot Phelim. Thank you so much.
Not at all.
Great time, Phelim.
Great.
Bye.
Million for having me. Bye.
Bye.